Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you here today. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording, along with the slides, will be made available through our Data Harvest Hub site within the next few days. Definitely, I would hope so by the end of next week at the very latest. So before we jump into the presentation, I wanted to kind of introduce you to everybody on our end who will be presenting or who is supporting us with this grant program. So in case you don't know me, I'm Marianne Cardwell. I'm one of two deputies here at the Indiana Geographic Information Office, and I lead our programs and outreach. And talking today, we also have Karen Arnold, who is our GIS project and grant coordinator, Matt Evans, who is our data harvest subject matter expert, Rick Raw and Dan Council are our outreach coordinators. And then I'm really happy to be able to have Dan Schmidt join us on the call today, who is with the State Budget Agency. And he is a grants management analyst and will help us orient us a little bit with the eCivis grant platform. All right, so we have a packed agenda, but we're hoping that we can get through the slides in about 30 minutes and then still have plenty of time for questions and answers after we are done with our slides. So I will give you a brief overview of the grant program, but then Karen will give you all of the details on the grants and how to, what the requirements are, what success means. Matt, as our subject matter expert, will talk about our VEP platform, and we'll talk about what that is in just a bit. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Dan will talk about the eCivis grant management platform. And then Karen will close it up with some resources, and then we'll open it up to questions for everybody. So before we go into the meat of the presentation, I wanted to point you to some things on your screen that you might not have seen before. This is kind of our first time doing a webinar using this feature in Teams, and I wanted to make sure you all kind of knew how to do things. So to start off, you have all been muted, and actually your microphones have been disabled, your cameras have been disabled. At the end, when we do the Q&A, if you have a question, we would recommend that you raise your hand, and that's that button right there at the top in the middle. And once it's your turn, we will enable your microphone, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself. During the presentation, feel free to go and put any questions that you have in the chat, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. One of the things I really like about this structure in Teams is that I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you wanted to take a screenshot of a slide, and by the time you get to hit your print screen button, the presenter had gone to the next slide. Well, in this case, you can actually go to a previous slide or a next slide, and that will just be for you. But if you want to get back to the slide that the presenter is on, you can click on that button in the bottom left to sync back with the slide that we are currently talking about. And if you want to see a grid view of all of the slides, that's that button there to the right edge of the bottom left side of all of those buttons. So hopefully that will help. All right, so I am really excited to talk to you today about our office's very first grants, and that grant will be supporting the Data Harvest program. I do want to thank everybody who has helped us put this grant program together. We've been working on this for quite a few months and talked to many, many, many people, both at the state and outside of the state. But I especially want to recognize Karen on our team, who has done a fantastic job putting it all together and doing the vast majority of the work. So through this grant, we are continuing a long history of state support for locally sourced data. Just as a couple of examples, in the past 15 years, the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and the State 911 Board have both provided grants that have directly or indirectly benefited the Data Harvest program. I do want to emphasize that this grant is a one-time grant available to all Indiana counties. And later during the presentation, Karen will provide a little bit more information about the grant itself and eligibility requirements. So the Data Harvest program started in 2008 and has evolved over the past 16 years. But at the root, the intent has always been to collect authoritative county-level data to generate statewide data sets. For the past several years, we have been extremely fortunate as all 92 counties and their vendors have participated. And currently we collect address points, street center lines, parcel boundaries, and administrative boundaries. The data harvest program would really not be possible with all of your hard work. If you work for a county or a municipality in Indiana, please know that the effort that you have put into these data sets has benefited many, and it does not go unrecognized. And that goes for the vendors who support you as well. This data is truly foundational, and it supports many counties, state agencies, the federal government, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector. Our mission with this grant is to support you in improving the quality of these data sets. And our vision is to achieve accurate and reliable data that allows us to make better informed decisions, improve efficiency, and foster sustainable practices. And now, oopsie doodle, sorry. I thought I was further ahead than I was. We do have three main goals that we'd like to accomplish through this grant program. The first one is that we want to support the development and use of authoritative statewide spatial information. We also want to help counties reach the NENA NextGen 911 GIS data model. And finally, we want to encourage and support collaborations to develop and implement sustainable data quality management practices. These collaborations are mainly targeted between county GIS staff and municipality staff who might be managing their own spatial data. As I mentioned earlier, we have four main data sets that we are interested in, and these are also the focus of this grant. And those are site structure address points, road center lines and address ranges, parcel boundaries, and administrative boundaries. And now, Karen will talk to you about the details of the grant.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So I'm going to cover the grant details, and that's going to include the funding, what the allowable costs are, what the timeline is, the eligibility requirements, and the project details. And then I'll give a little bit of detail about how we're going to measure success before passing the baton off to Matt to cover the VEP platform. So let's start with funding. So the SEED grant is a non-competitive grant awarding state appropriated funds to subrecipients that meet the eligibility requirements that we'll discuss a little bit later on. The funding supports a maximum award of $30,000. However, additional funding might be available and you may request it if you have a demonstrated need and assuming that we have the additional funding available. The minimum award that we're allowing is $5,000. So what are the allowable costs? So for allowable costs, we have salaries and wages, fringe benefits, consulting and professional services, supplies, including software, and other category. If you choose to put something in the supply category, that can be office supplies or software. But the thing to point out is that the total cost in the supplies category can't exceed $5,000. And that $5,000 cap is for the initial budget plus any amendments that might happen throughout the grant life cycle. During the application process, you'll have an opportunity to put in items in the budget in these categories. And if you do have something that falls within the other category, please be sure to make sure that you provide lots of extra details on what that funding will cover. All right, let's talk a little bit about the timeline. So excitingly, the solicitation is out there on the SBA website right now. You can look through all of the details. The NOFO document's been uploaded. You'll see some of the other support documents. We do still have a couple of documents out there that we'll be uploading later. And that includes an example for the application, for the profile that you'll see when you're applying for the grant, and also an example of the budget. But one thing you'll see when you go to that solicitation is that you won't find an apply button. And the reason for that is because the application period doesn't actually open until October 14th. The first application is going to be due on November 12th for the first round of applications. And what I mean by that is that this application period is going to be open for an extended period on a rolling basis for 15 months. Each month, we're going to review 8 awards, And if they meet the eligibility requirements, then those 8 will be awarded. If we receive more than 8 in any one given month, eligible applications, then those are just going to carry forward, and we'll just keep rolling those forward throughout the application period. While you have 15 months to apply, I encourage you not to wait until the last month to submit that application, because during that last month, we're not going to award more than 8 awards in that period. Okay, so here's a slide that has some questions. I have some how questions and some what if questions. I'm going to cover the how questions and leave the what if questions for you to read through. If you need any clarification on those what if questions, please be sure to bring those up during the Q&A session. So first 2 questions, how many times can I apply and how long do I have to work on the project? And the answer to both of these is 1. So we are accepting 1 application per county, and you have 1 year from the date of award to complete the project. So easy enough, you remember 1 and 1, and that'll get you going. So how do you get a baseline of your data quality? So at the beginning of the project, if you want to find out, what do I really need to work on? What do I need to have as my proposed project? If you've been onboarded to VEP, you can use VEP to run a report, and that can give you your baseline validation report. But if you haven't been onboarded to VEP, or you're not using a vendor that has been onboarded, then you can request a report through our office. Matt, when he covers the VEP slides, he'll also cover, when should you request the VEP validation report from us, and when should you run it on your own? And then he'll also go through the steps on how to do that. Okay, so let's dive into some project details. So the seed grant, we prioritize the projects into 3 different levels. We have the priority 1 projects, including the address ranges, street names, address points, and street centerline data. And then the priority 2 and 3 projects include incorporated boundaries, parcel data, and other administrative boundary areas. One thing that's important to note on this, on our eligible projects, is that if you are requesting funds for priority 2 or priority 3 projects, all of the higher level priority projects have to meet the success criteria in order to receive funding for those lower level priorities. All right, so there are a few requirements that we're asking for to be eligible for the grant. And the first one is that the funds for the grant should be used for county-wide improvements to your spatial data. So what this means is that if you choose a project to improve, your address ranges or your street centerline data, we need that to cover the entire county. You can't exclude a city or any other area that might be managing the data on their own. For this project, for the funds to be eligible, it has to cover the entire county data. We're asking that the counties work collaboratively within their authoritative area with other agencies, addressing authorities, emergency management personnel. And really the goal for this is to put together something that sustains after the grant project is complete. That way that if you develop that collaborative relationship and work on the data in this project together, hopefully that will carry forward in the future. The final requirement is that we're asking that any party that does any of the data improvements completes a knowledge assessment, and we're asking that you have a score of 80% or higher on that knowledge assessment. The knowledge assessment is about 6 questions, I think, and it includes some screenshots of spatial data maps and an attribute table. And we ask that you identify the issues that you see in those screenshots. That document will be available in the files section of the solicitation on the SBA website, along with the notice of funding opportunity and other important documents. And then once you complete that, you can return that to us through the GIO grants email. And we'll have all of the links to all of these places in our resources. All right, so one of the most important things when you're starting a grant program is to measure how well and how worthwhile the program is. And we're going to do this in two ways. We're going to do it by verifying the accuracy of the schema and the domains, and by passing the data through various validation rules. We, well, by we, I mean Marion and Matt, have put together some minimum criterion for passing scores of the validation or of the data when it goes through these validation rules. And those are all outlined in the NOFO document. So, and if you have any questions about that, we'll be happy to answer any of those. All right, so what does it look like when the project's complete? You're successful if your data follows the NG911 data schema, the fields are correctly populated, and you achieve that minimum passing score when passing your data through the VEP Validation Pro platform that I mentioned a little bit ago. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it on to Matt to go into a little bit more detail on the VEP platform.
All right, thanks, Karen. So yeah, I'll spend just a couple of slides here kind of walking folks through what VEP is, how to request a preliminary validation report if that's something that the county or vendor might need, and also just some example screenshots of a kind of sample validation report and some of the markup data sets that come out of the VEP software. So VEP is a platform that's developed by Michael Baker International and Datamark Technologies. This vendor had won the state's request for proposals late last year. And for those counties and vendors who took part in phase one of the state's framework data improvement project this year, you're probably pretty familiar with it at this point. But VEP stands for Validate, Edit, and Provision, and it is a kind of cloud-native software platform that allows spatial data uploads, spatial data validation against a series of different geometric and attribute-based rules, and then also supports automated data aggregation up to the either regional or statewide level. These rules primarily focus on Next-Gen 911 specific kind of attributes, but also include kind of a wealth of different topology or geometric checks that are critical for a Next-Gen 911 deployment when that eventually happens, but also might provide some good benefit for your data just in a general sense. So the way the VEP works is really that the data gets uploaded into the system. Once it's in the system, these different kind of sets of validation rules can be ran against the data. And then once that's completed, the user gets notified that that validation run has been completed. And then those validation kind of results, both in a kind of spreadsheet format or report format, but also in a spatially enabled or GIS data kind of markup data set, can then be downloaded, integrated into your local GIS software to take a look at the results and compare to your local data and then make updates as needed. This platform does allow data to be marked as exceptions. We understand that, not every anomaly in the data is reasonable to be fixed, or there might be very valid reasons that it would show up as an anomaly within kind of the rules within the Next-Gen 911 data model. And again, really just would reiterate that a lot of these validation rules are pretty specific towards the Next-Gen 911 data model and a lot of the rules that kind of work behind the scenes within that data model. So on this slide, you can see just a couple sample screenshots. One of these is kind of a document-based report, kind of providing an assessment of the data and how it fits within the Next-Gen 911 data model. Something kind of to help users who have not used VEP yet kind of get acquainted with the expectations and what that data model looks like compared to your local data that you submit to us. And then on the right side of the screen is an example of those GIS markup data sets where you can see some addresses being mapped to the street center line that they're associated with. Green indicating, within the kind of symbology in this map, green indicating that things look good. Those red lines kind of indicate potential anomalies in the data that then could be investigated within the local data sets. So again, I know there are at least a handful of counties and vendors that participated in phase one of our kind of framework data improvement project this year. So if you have participated and really been onboarded with your data into the VEP platform, there's really no need to request a preliminary validation report since you've already received that, already used VEP to submit your data to validate it, ideally even multiple times. But if you're working in a county or supporting a county that has not been onboarded into VEP, we would recommend or require that you request an initial kind of preliminary report that our office would provide for you. So on this slide kind of walks you through some pretty simple instructions on how to request that report. So it starts by just sending a emailed request to giogrants@iot.in.gov, just mentioning which county you're working with and kind of what you need. From there, we can follow up with some instructions on how to upload the data to our FTP site. There is a link to that FTP site on the new grant program page that we just shared out on the Data Harvest website earlier this morning. And once you submit your data, we would also ask you to complete and upload a kind of schema crosswalk table that for those who have participated in the data harvest before, this should look pretty familiar. Just kind of walking through the names of your fields to the NextGen 911 and Indiana specific fields that we ask for during the data harvest to make sure that when we upload your data, that it's accurately reflected in the system. So with that, I will pass it back to Karen and Dan to keep walking us through everything.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Again, good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Schmidt. I am a member of the grants management team at the State Budget Agency. My role specifically over the last year has been to drive the organizational change management aspects of the implementation of eCivis. I'm going to tell you more about eCivis in a moment. But the organizational change management components have related to preparing folks to use this eCivis system, communications and training, and working with agencies to get it integrated into their systems. Now we're at a place where we're starting to move the system out into the field and working with recipients of grants from the state. And so that's what brings us together this morning. First thing I want to do is to introduce eCivis to you and talk a little bit about what eCivis is. This is a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of an introduction. Not going to go into a great deal of detail, but just familiarize you with what eCivis is and what you can expect coming in the coming days and months as you interact with this grant program. eCivis is the state's new statewide grants management system. We made a determination a couple of years ago that we needed to be better about how we manage federal money. This also includes state money, but the impetus at the beginning was managing our federal grants better. We needed a system that was the same from agency to agency within the state so that there were synergies and we didn't lose institutional knowledge when folks moved from one agency to the other, didn't want to have a new learning curve when folks needed to go to a new agency and learn how to use that system. We wanted one system across the entire state. We wanted something that would help us to streamline the way that we manage grants. We wanted something that would help us to know with a click of a button how much money we have in grants and where it is going. And when the grants get to the place of being closed out, that everything is closed out appropriately, both with the funding agency at the federal government level or within our state ledger for state-funded grants, and also then in our accounting system. So eCivis is the platform where we're going to do all of that. It's part of a larger effort called Next Level Grants Management, which is our effort to improve how we manage grants. eCivis is the biggest component of it. There are lots of other pieces attached to it, but it's the big piece of it that you will interact with the most. On our website, we have a page that is labeled State Agency Grant Opportunities. That's where you will find the solicitation for this program. You click on the hyperlink for the seed grant. It'll pull up a page that has multiple tabs with information that'll help you get familiar with what's going to be required for the application, what are the timelines involved, who you reach out to for more information, etc. Applications themselves will be submitted through what is called the eCivis Grants Portal. right? eCivis more generally, but the portal is your entry into the system. Setting up the portal account is really easy. It's your name, its address, and your email address, and you select a password, and you're in. Okay. And when it comes to submitting the application, we like to say that if you've ordered anything off of Amazon, you can handle submitting an application through eCivis. All right. We do so much online these days. We fill in text fields. We select all that apply from a series of radial buttons. We have a drop-down menu where we select the choice, right? It's those kinds of fields that we interact with. The kind of information that you're going to be requested to put into your application is the same that you would in any other setting, right? Whether we were doing it in paper or some sort of a forms filter, it just happens to happen here in the eCivis Grants portal. So all of that is to say that there is no boogeyman under the bed, right? You'll be able to handle the application. This is also the environment where you will submit activity reports and reimbursement requests. All of that is managed through your eCivis portal account. And then IoT through their door, which is the grant network door into eCivis, will manage their side of it. So everything's happening in one place, allows us to get the reporting out of it that we want. Now, if all of that scares the bejesus out of you, it's a technical term in the grants world, we have a plethora, a complete suite of training materials available on our grants management website at the SBA website. We have user guides, we have quick reference sheets, we have training videos 3 to 5 minutes in length if you are someone who likes to hear something explained and demonstrated. Or if you're like me and you like to have a dialogue, we also have office hours specifically for applicants and subrecipients the first and third Thursday of each month. That runs from 1 to 2 o'clock on that Thursday. That's Eastern time, 1 to 2. We also will be sending out newsletters and more information directly to you in the coming weeks as we get closer to that October 14 date to help you understand more about eCivis and what is to come. There'll be hyperlinks in that information as well to direct you to specific places within our website. So it's a pleasure to chat with you this morning about eCivis. Excited to see you getting into the system and using it and being a part of this effort of improving how we manage grants. And then I'm going to be around for the rest of the call today. So if there's any questions, be happy to chat about that when we get to that part of our presentation. And I think, Karen, I'm turning it back over to you now.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Okay, so now we're going to cover some of the resources that Dan mentioned. We have those outlined here in the slide with links to the different resources that are available. As Dan mentioned, we have the Next Level Grant Management recipients resources, and those are, like Dan mentioned, there's everything, all of the user guides, the videos, anything to help the subrecipients work through applying for the grant, to managing the grant, to closing out the grant. Everything is available there on the Next Level Grant Management Resources for Subrecipients webpage. As Dan mentioned, SBA also has the office hours the first and third Thursday of each month, 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. You can get to those office hours and find more information about that through the SBA web page for the grant management workshops. We also have a page and resources on our Data Harvest website. As Matt mentioned, there is a page specifically related to the grants that has a lot of the same information that you're seeing today in the presentation. And then there's also the VEP public website that has resources related to VEP and some of those different validations that may be interesting to each of you. All right, how do you get in touch with us? So we have as we've mentioned a couple of times now, we've got a hub page for the grant program. And so we'll have a link to that in the slides. We also have an email set up specifically for our grants program, and that's giogrants@iot.in.gov. And then, feel free to follow us at the, through our blog post or just the indiana.gov GIS pages. And I think Marianne also put a link to the webpage in the chat. So thank you, Marianne. And the email, thanks. Okay, so now we are going to open it up to questions, and we've stayed right on schedule, so we've got about a half an hour for the platform, to open it up to questions.
And feel free to, again, type in the chat or hit the raise button at the top of your screen, and then we will enable your microphone.
You should be able to unmute yourself and turn your camera on at this point in time. I believe that's all set up.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
All right, it looks like we've got a question in the chat, and it's related to the VEP. So it is, how does a non-governmental agency get onboarded to DataMark VEP? Matt, could you cover that one, or Marianne?
Yeah, I can handle that. So Jeff, if you are, for example, a vendor that's supporting a county in the work that they do with their GIS data stewardship and maintenance, it would be fairly identical to how we would onboard, a county government employee. So we would get your data uploaded similarly to kind of the workflow that I talked about earlier. For the vendors, what we do, and kind of for the counties as well, is that user, when they eventually get fully set up in VEP, gets assigned to a jurisdiction that you work with for the data stewardship and maintenance, and that would enable you to upload data, things like that. Kind of the way this program works is that I believe quarterly we plan to kind of run and I just saw your follow-up. It would be one login, Jeff. So your user is the same, but you would be assigned to different jurisdictions, and then you would be able to pick what jurisdiction you're uploading and validating your data for. So it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, if there's more questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them.
And to emphasize what Matt mentioned, because I don't think we mentioned it in our slides, it is in the NOFO, I believe, but on a quarterly basis for those counties that have not been onboarded to VEP, we will be happy to run your data through the VEP platform and give that information back to you so you can see the progress that you've made.
As a new person who has not applied for a grant yet, would you mind going through a demonstration of where we actually go to set up our portal or our login? I've been playing around on the Indiana State grant site, and when I click on some of the hyperlinks, it just takes me back to where I started.
I can jump in here, Karen, if you'd like.
Thanks, Dan. Yep.
I only see initials here, MD.
So Monica
MD,
Davis, sorry, Elkhart
okay,
County.
No, that's fine. MD is just fine with me too.
That's the link I was using.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason you're not getting prompted for a portal account there is that the solicitation right now doesn't have an apply button. When October 14 comes, there will be an apply button that appears. That's the publication date for the grant solicitation. Then you click on the apply, you'll get prompted for the portal account set up then, and then you'll be into the portal right then.
Okay, so set up the portal after application.
That's right. Yeah, you set up your portal account credentials, then there's more you can do to set up your profile, but at that point you'll be in, and then we'll be able to access the application. But that apply button won't be there until the 14th of October. And I would add on to that too, just to extend it, we will have in our office hours and otherwise training available to help you walk through how to set up that portal account and how to access the application and so on. So if you get in there and you feel like you're swimming, we will have resources from our grants team available for you to help you through that.
And Monica, I also wanted to add that in the files the solicitation that you accessed through the link that you provided. And we will have an example of what the application looks like, what the profile looks like, and what the budget looks like. And those are actual screenshots coming directly from the eCivis platform. So you'll have you'll know what questions you're going to need to be able to answer, and you can prepare for that ahead of it. And you'll be able to see that ahead of the apply button appearing.
Question. Does each county have to set up for application on their own, or can I use a consultant to apply for me?
So you will need someone from your county to be the portal account holder.
Okay.
And the way that it's set up, eCivis in the portal, you have one person that controls the application that is submitted. So you'll have a team that works outside of eCivis, puts the pieces together, and then one person from your team will be actually the one in the portal for the purposes of putting the application together. If you are awarded, then you will be able to build out a project team in the portal. Everyone will have access at that point for their various components. Right now, the system doesn't let you have a team for the application side, but the post-award side, everybody gets their own portal account, and then you can build out the team there. So at that point, you can engage other team members if you have a consultant that's performing services at that point. But for the application itself, I would say let your consultant maybe drive the process of putting the pieces together, and then someone within your staff actually inputs it into the portal. That makes sense, Monica?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff in the chat had another question on whether there was a specific list of data standards and requirements for priority 2 and 3 data sets. So there are, and our Data Harvest Hub sites has a lot of that information. So if you go to that website and click on the submit button at the top, it has a link in there to a zip file that includes 2 things. One is a spreadsheet, and the other one is a template file geodatabase. And that will tell you the schema for each layer and the requirements for each field. Whether it's something that we require, it'll show you an example of what a value within that field would look like. And then if you go to the resources tab on our Data Harvest website, you will have, there's an overview in there, but there's also framework data improvement and information on specifically address points, street center line schemas, and just additional information. I know you were talking about priority 2 and 3, so that's not quite as relevant. Those data sets are typically fairly simple, those boundary data sets. So the schema is really simple. It's just asking for 1 or 2 fields, and in terms of the geographic requirements, we have more information. I think Matt should be able to provide some information as well on the VEP platform has a website with a lot of information on the validation rules. And so Matt, maybe you can put that in the chat when you have the chance as well.
Sorry, and this is Jeff, just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
And I guess I was more interested in the spatial capabilities, like
yes.
just things like are the boundaries snap to center line or right away, and what do we do with slivers? And everyone's data is kind of developed a little bit differently spatially.
Yeah. So I think we could probably spend an hour talking about that. So I would actually recommend following up a little bit with Matt directly, and I could put his actually, if you just email us at GIO grants, we all have access to that inbox and we can respond to you. Typically, we would, if it's a layer that makes sense to have snaps, to have snapping on, we would want that, things like a community boundary, a city or a town boundary, unless you're sharing a boundary with something else, there might not be a reason for that. But yes, we would like it at least to be snapped to the county boundary, although that can be a little tricky depending on which county boundary layer you are using. We do have one that you could use for the purpose of this. Some of the layers that we're looking for are not part of the Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. They're not part of the NG 911 standard. Definitely parcels is not. But some of the boundaries we're looking for are not part of the 911 standard. So those have slightly less burdensome requirements. So it kind of depends on the layer, but Matt should be able to, he put the link to that support page from Datamark's VEP platform, and that has a lot of information. But if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be happy to answer those.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I see one question in the chat from Chris, and then Charlene, I see you have your hand raised. So I'll go to you after Chris's question. So is there a maximum or minimum amount the grant will be for per county applicant? So yes, the minimum is 5,000. The maximum is 30,000. If you read the NOFO, we may be able to provide additional funding over 30,000, but you're going to have to kind of make a case for it. We have a limited amount of funds to cover all 92 counties. But if you have a specific situation where you can kind of justify why you might need more funding, please include that in your application. And you're also welcome to reach out to us beforehand to kind of explain the situation in your case. I hope that helps, Chris. So I'm going to go to Charlene next, and then Dan or Karen, maybe after that, you could answer Jeff's question from 1137 about invoicing. But Charlene, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got a quick question. And I haven't had a chance to read through the NOFO, but is the NOFO have the stipulation of what kind of reporting the applicant has to do as to who is actually doing the work for them if they're not internally doing it?
Yes. Karen, do you want to expand on that? Because you're probably more familiar with the details than I am.
I'm sorry, I was working on Jeff's question. So could you repeat that again, Charlene?
Sure. Does the NOFO tell the applicant what kind of requirements the actual person that's doing the work is required to have? Or is it only the questionnaire?
Yeah, so anyone that's going to be doing any of the data improvements will need to complete that questionnaire. So if that's a vendor or if that's someone that the county hires to come in to do that, anyone that would be doing those data improvements would need to complete that questionnaire and have a score of 80% or better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so the applicant will be required to submit who all's doing the work, actually identify them.
Yes, we do ask in the application if you're going to be using a vendor, and then as far as just to go a little bit into Jeff's question, he asked about how the invoicing was handled and contracts and management. So you can subcontract with the vendor to do the work, and all of the invoicing and requests for reimbursements are going to be managed through the eCivis portal through the financial and activity reporting sections.
Okay, so, thank you. That answered my question.
Okay, great.
Karen, I'll just add one piece to that on the invoicing. At some point, this will occur to somebody, and the question is there a cost to have a portal account? And the answer is no. There is no limit to the number of portal account users. We pay for licenses on the agency side, on the state side, but on the subrecipient side, eCivis doesn't charge. They want to have as many folks in there as possible because, well, frankly, the more that are in there, the easier it is for us to continue to use the system. So as you're thinking about adding more people into the portal to help you manage your grant, don't worry about the cost of it. One more user, there is no additional cost.
Thanks, Dan. So I see another question in the chat from Michael. His question is, how do we know if our data is not compliant with the standards and needs updated? So if you are part of a county that has not been onboarded to VEP, you can just submit your data to us, and we can run your data through the VEP platform and provide you with the validation report. So just to expand on that a little bit, that will give you a file geodatabase, and it will have a number of feature classes and then a lot of probably rows that will tell you the problems, and it will identify specific problems with your attribute table and also specific problems in terms of geometry or topology. some of the topology checks are within that layer, but we also have some checks that are between layers. So one of the examples that Matt showed earlier with the green and the red lines, that's called a fishbone analysis. So it compares your address point information to your street center lines and draws a line between the address point and where that would be on your street center line. So it provides all of that information back to you. So it's a nice way for you to then see what's there, and then be able to, zoom to that area and fix the problem. Just as a note, it might look overwhelming in terms of the number of errors. We do have, Matt, I think it's the framework data improvement page on our hub site. Yeah, thank you. We have some kind of tips on things to focus on first. For example, if you don't have the country name populated or the state name or your county name populated in that field, that's a mass calculate, and that will, significantly diminish the number of errors. So there are a few things that we care about a little bit more. There are some easy ones that you can tackle and fix very quickly. But yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. And again, we are more than happy to run your data through the VEP platform.
Yeah, and I think, Marianne, if I could expand on that just a little bit, Michael,
absolutely.
is that template geodatabase and spreadsheet that kind of walks you through the schema that Marianne mentioned might be even before requesting that we run it through VEP, could be a good way to kind of get an idea of how your data compares to what we're looking for, because we do have in the specifically in the geodatabase, because it does allow attribute domains, is a list of all the fields, their lengths, and then those domains and what fields they're applied to. So you could get a sense of if your directionals are abbreviated, but you see in the domain that we ask for them to be all spelled out. That might be kind of a good initial way to kind of assess how your data compares to the template that we're looking for. But again, like Marianne said, we'd be more than happy to run your data through and answer any questions that you might have, really at any point in time.
Yeah, thanks for expanding on that. And that actually reminded me, one other thing that the VP tool does not do, but we will be looking at is validating your attribute values for domain fields. So if, for example, street direction, that's part of a domain, there are 8 potential values for that: east, west, south, north, and then the corner ones. We do have a ArcGIS Pro Toolbox that is available for you to download. I put the link in there. That will allow you to do things like if you don't have your street addresses separated into multiple fields, it'll help you do that. It'll also allow you to identify and quickly fix domain values. So we see a lot, for example, for your street type. Maybe you have street abbreviated, or you're not consistent, right? You might have it misspelled sometimes. Maybe you have 3 E's in street instead of just 2. So there are tools in there that you could use to kind of quickly fix that, and then some tips on how to split up values as well on that page. If you have any questions about that one, feel free to follow up with us as well. But hopefully that helps, Michael. And I see another question from John. Okay, that's not really a question, just a statement, I think, John, unless I'm misinterpreting it. And yes, you're right. The Karen and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong or if you've already said this before, but our agreement for this grant will be with the county. So if the county decides to contract the work out to a vendor, the county will be responsible for paying the vendor, but you will get money back from the states as part of the grants. Karen and Dan, am I good? I didn't say anything wrong there.
No.
Okay.
No,
all right.
Absolutely.
Good.
And I reiterated that in my follow-up comment to Jeff.
Okay.
Also.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
And Jeff, I see you have your hand raised, but I have a really quick answer to Trevor's question. Trevor, yes, you can absolutely request a VEP report before submitting a proposal request. And I would actually guess that, to me, that would be the better way to approach it, because how would you know how much work you have without knowing what the issues are with your data? So we would be happy to run that through. Now, if we get all 90 if we get 90 counties asking us for a report today, it might take us a little while to step through it, but we hope to be able to get those, get the results to you within a few business days after that. Jeff, go ahead.
I'm so sorry you let all the questions. This is very well set up, by the way, as far as state grants. I just,
Sweet.
as far as data quality, so this is initial data. This is setting up data. Is there a maintenance plan, or is there any benefit to developing a maintenance plan going forward for counties and communities, or is there a requirement to have a maintenance plan in place?
That is a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff. Karen might have a little bit more to say on that in terms of the questions and the applications, but in the application. But yes, while this is a one-time grant, really, we would encourage you all not to look at this as I'm going to fix the data this one time, but then I'm not maintaining it to this standard. We will continue asking for this data on an annual basis from every county. So once you've done the work to get it to meet the standard, please try to maintain it to that standard, because it's, data changes all the time. So we definitely would encourage that. And Karen, can you elaborate on I know there's at least one question on maintenance in the application.
Yes, yeah. So we do have a question in the application about how the county plans to sustain the data quality going forward, and it is basically a text box that we're just asking you to tell us, what you would plan to do to sustain that. We don't have a requirement to submit a sustainability plan as such, or to develop one as part of the grant. But we are encouraging a lot of thought into, how do we future-proof this? How do we fix it at the source and then maintain it so that it doesn't have to, it's easy to continue going forward.
Jeff, hopefully that was that answered your question. And if so, Charlene, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks,
you.
Jeff. One question: Does VEP allow exceptions? I can see it happening in a county where they know something's wrong, but it's going to take 5 other departments to decide to change it. And could it be considered an exception, and then to be looked at later, so that it wouldn't go through?
Yes,
quarterly,
absolutely. Yeah, what we don't want to see is, every error to be marked as an exception and trying to weasel through that way. That won't fly. But yes, absolutely. We understand from talking to several counties that, you might have an address that's not in the right order, but you can't just go and change it like that. You might need to work with a number of other people. It might require a lot of approvals from elsewhere. So yes, absolutely. That would be a valid exception.
So, I mean, the system has an attribute that you can flip saying we're looking
Yes.
at it. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Charlene, in the markup data, there's like a exception kind of flag attribute in the GIS data that then those exceptions can be uploaded into the system, and then it kind of marks them within VEP as being a valid anomaly or an exception to the anomaly.
Great, thank you. Of
course.
And I see Michael had a question in the chat on where the files section is located, and Karen has provided. Anyway, go ahead, Karen.
Yep, I was just going to point out that I did respond to Michael's question in the chat about where to find the files section. And that's going to be when you go to that state agency grant opportunities webpage and click on the link for the seed grant. When you open that up, you'll see several tabs that are blue and they have white text. And one of those tabs is files. And the document has already been uploaded to that section, so you can download it. It's named a little bit differently. I did add that the IGIO seed grant in front of that title. So you'll see that it says submittal schema spreadsheet still, though.
I was going to try to show that on the screen, but I hopefully I'm not ending the presentation when I'm doing this. So I'm a little nervous about hitting stop. But yes, it's really easy. If you go to that link, it's right there. any other questions?
I think we've got about 5 more minutes left, but if you think of any questions after the meeting ends, please just email us to the GIO grants email, and one of us will be happy to answer anything that you think of after the meeting.
I want to thank all of you for joining today. Really happy to see so many people interested in the grants. Like I said, we'll have the slides and the recording of this presentation up on our on that grants page on the Data Harvest website here in the next few days, probably sometime next week, realistically speaking. And really, we would love to have a lot of interest in this grants. We really care about this data. We understand how important it is, both at the local level, but elsewhere as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And if for some reason you don't get an answer within a couple of business days, please just ping us again. It might have fallen through the cracks, and we would hate to realize that we missed something. So, and I'll put a link to just the root of the Data Harvest website, which has just a lot of information in general. I'll put that in the chat. We'll stay on until noon Eastern, but otherwise, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Oh, I see Jeff has another. Oh, wait, no, I just have to scroll down. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Monica.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Chris, so we have a couple of deadlines. One is obviously the last month that you can apply and try to get the grants. But in general, once the grant, the contract or agreement, whatever the name is in place, you have 1 year to get the work done. Chris, just saw your question about state roads within the county. We don't get that information right now from NDOT, so we would still like to have that information from the county. And currently that is what we're getting from the counties through the Data Harvest program.
Marianne?
Yes.
Related but unrelated. I found out today when I'm dealing with some addressing issues in our EnerGov permitting software, and they follow USPS standards, which means everything has to be capitalized and abbreviated, which is obviously opposite of what 911 requires for NENA Next Gen.
Of course it is. Yep.
Of course. I am creating that internally for them. Is that something that is being addressed? Since most people still have to provide things to third-party softwares in other formats.
Yeah, so I don't know if this will completely answer your question or not. And one of the things that Matt and I have talked about is, are there any kind of transformations that might be fairly common that we could maybe put together and develop and provide for all of you. So if you have the NINA standard and another standard that you often have to put your data in, like the one you mentioned, maybe that is something that we could explore and create maybe a workbench, an FME, or something along those lines that would easily convert from one to the other. We've kind of thought about what could we do to make things a little bit easier for all of you. One of the things that holds us back is, there are 92 counties and probably at least 92 different ways of doing it. But your example there may be something that would be beneficial to more than one county. So if you don't mind following up with us on that later, maybe we could explore that a little bit more.
Thank you. Great
Yeah,
presentation, by the way.
Cool. Thanks. I'm expecting you to apply, Monica.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'll be one of the first.
Sweet.
We're already working on trying to clean stuff here on our side, but there's
Nice.
a lot of cleaning that has to be done.
Yeah. It's a little scary sometimes when you get that first report. I would assume anyway, not being on your end of it, but yeah.
Our road center line layer needs some help.
Need some TLC.
Address points are pretty good.
Nice.
But it doesn't matter if RCL is not good.
Well, it's still really good for the geocoder that we put together for the state, because that's kind of,
yes.
I mean, it's a multi-role now, but it's been interesting running some addresses, and we get a really good percentage of addresses matching on an address point, which is, I think, better than a street center line, and consistency in terms of consistency. All right, folks. Well, it's 12:01. So we're going to shut this down for now. But again, thank you for those who are still hanging on, and have a wonderful end of the week and enjoy the dry, sunny weather. Bye.
Thank you.